Hello, everybody. Thanks again for joining us. We're going to get started right now. I want to welcome everybody who's taken time out of their day to join our webinar. Hard to believe we're already at the end of June, and the dog days of summer are upon us. Hopefully everybody gets some good information out of this webinar, and we can have some additional conversations post-webinar with some of you or all of you. Anyway. Steve Roesing, CEO and President of ASMGi, will kick this off. So take it away, Steve.
Great. Thank you, Paul. And thank you to all the attendees out there who chose to share some of your time with us today. We have a great topic to talk about today, and we're going to go through some of the business drivers for managed security services in general, but also demonstrate and explain how it is that you could leverage managed security to both decrease costs and increase your security posture and lower your risk, which is ideal, quite honestly. So that's the intention. And with me today, I have Frank Yako, our CIO and Director of Strategic Initiatives, to co-present. So thank you for being with us today, Frank.
Yep. Thanks, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Just a quick word about ASMGi. As a full stack provider, we have a lot of breadth and depth in our organization, IT services, GRC and cyber services, and SDLC. And really leveraging that breadth of knowledge and experience has really enabled us to create what I call the everything as a service model. And so we bundle a lot of different solutions, both the technology and the services in general, to create I think very specific bundles to meet the needs of our customers. And so I think that's pretty special from that regard, and that's what we're really going to talk about today. So just from an agenda standpoint, why is managed security important today? What is our one team MDR and MSOC service, and why is it special? So who is it intended for, and what's different really between this and the other things that you'll find on the market? So to kick us off, I thought we'd do a poll question. Paul's going to get a poll introduced to all the attendees, so you see a pop-up box, and then you can just select your answers. But basically, do you leverage managed security today, and why is it? Like, what is the business driver for you in doing that? So why don't you just take a minute, if you will, to respond to that poll, and I think it only runs for 30 seconds or so. We'll see how we do. What do you think, Frank? Any guess as to where we're going to land?
I think there's a good chance that there might be some organizations that don't have these types of services. It's certainly becoming more common, but there's still quite a few organizations that have not adopted these types of services or capabilities internally.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We'll give it another second here. I don't know how long this is going to run. Okay, I think I'll go ahead and just report on where we're at. And if anybody hasn't responded to the survey, I'm not sure if it's going to stay live or not. But so I think you're right. Excuse me, Frank, in that 50% of the respondents chose none of the above, E, so are choosing to do their cybersecurity internally. 25% of the respondents chose A, yes, we do outsource to managed services providers because we don't have enough people in security, and 25% selected D as all of the above, so we don't have enough people, we don't have the expertise, and actually we want to focus on our business. It looks like it's, changed slightly to now 40% as all of the above. So anyway, it's probably not a big surprise to any of you. There's, from a business driver standpoint, what we're seeing in the industry is a lot of people have historically done their security internally, but now as we think about shifting our focus I think people in general are starting to choose to really focus on core competencies and the value drivers or revenue drivers for their business and look at ways to leverage other folks to do things. And managed security is one of those areas. And there are a number of reasons for that. But I wanted to talk about one thing in particularly, which is a quote that I pulled out of a book called Subscribe by Ken Suo. And I don't normally do this, but I'm going to read it. There's quite a few words, but it's so packed full of goodies that I think it's worth going through, and then maybe we can reflect on it a little bit. The way people buy has changed for good. We have new expectations as consumers. We prefer outcomes over ownership. We prefer customization, not standardization. And we want constant improvement, not planned obsolescence. We want a new way to engage with business. We want services, not products. The one-size-fits-all approach isn't going to cut it anymore, and to succeed in this new digital world, companies have to transform. So what do you think about that, Frank?
Yeah, I think it's the challenge that every organization's facing right now is that there's just not enough resources to deal with the demands, and that at the same time there's a constant evolution as it notes the requirement to be improving, so that either there's not obsolescence from the standpoint of not having the right solutions in place, but also to meet the needs of the business, and it has to be aligned to each business's requirements. So that can't be more applicable in today's day and age of being nimble.
Yep. And a couple key things for me when I read this, what I think about is that the whole concept of business transformation or digital transformation, it really affects everyone. And it doesn't matter if your customers are consumers, so you're in a B2C model, if your customers are businesses in a B2B model. It's true in all cases, right? And so a lot of times as consumers, we get influenced by the things that we use in our personal lives, and then we create expectations that we carry to work with us, right? We're the same person at work as we are at home. And Amazon, for example, they have all these aspects of their web properties that are unique, right? And probably innovative, even in the fact from a recommendation standpoint and all those things. But it influences expectations from a business standpoint. And so even from a web development perspective, if you will, a lot of people say, yeah, but on Amazon it works this way. And it's an interesting paradigm when you think about it, the influencers for how we make buying decisions and those kind of things. But just kind of a side note, it's Amazon, sure, they do what they do, and it's a great experience, and they should be commended for that. But they also spend billions of dollars on UI and user experience and web development in general, and among other things. And everybody doesn't have the luxury of doing that. So, but the other thing is, like we as a service provider, we think about how we can create bundles of services and packages that create good experience for our customers. But our customers also have customers, right? And they are either consumers in a B2C world or businesses in the B2B world. But every single one of these, both our customers and their customers, are transforming the way they do business. And I think more, now than ever, we see people really focused on core competencies and, hey, I want to just focus on the things that drive my business and not worry about everything else. And the other nugget in this quote, I think, is that people are looking for outcomes, right? Not necessarily features and functionality. They want outcomes. And in the security world, the outcome that everybody ought to be thinking about is improving your security posture or lowering your risks, right? That's how you actually move the needle in the security world. So let's talk about cybersecurity solutions more specifically. And one of the questions we always ask people when they're contemplating cybersecurity solutions is what problem are you trying to solve, or what problems are you trying to solve? And it's a simple question, and maybe even obvious, but it's amazing how many times people are just spending money to do cyber solutions, and they don't really have I'll say a reason, right? They can't answer the question, why are you doing this? And I think more importantly, it's about why are you doing this versus this, right? And again, if you frame up your overall goal as improving your security posture or lowering your risk, I think it can help you prioritize and things like that. But in any event, so what problems are you trying to solve? And the reality in the cyber world is there's no shortages, right, of things to try to solve or tools and technology to try to solve them. In 2014, the Council on Cybersecurity created a term called the fog of more. And really what that means is, more options, more tools, more knowledge, more advice, and more requirements, but not necessarily more security, right? So I think the lesson in all of this, it's very, very challenging and overwhelming, and it certainly can be for a business, for any business, even if, cybersecurity is your business. But if it isn't your business, it's really daunting, quite honestly. You've got vendors all over the place saying, hey, you have to do this right away. And how do you pick, right? So how do you choose? Any thoughts on that, Frank?
Yeah, it can be daunting because everyone's either pitching their solution as the best over another, competitor. It's almost impossible to compare a solution against each other, as well as everyone saying that their solution is the one that resolves your highest risk, and there's no way to really validate that or qualify any of those claims. So it really can be daunting for an end client to know how to navigate all that.
Yep. Agreed. So what is the challenge that most enterprises face with building a strategy? And I think it's really interesting, but if you think about like how most enterprises approach security, we see a lot of companies implementing tools and technologies based on frameworks. And what I mean by that is, like, if you're in healthcare and you have to be HIPAA compliant, you go through that. And I'm not minimizing the importance of compliance in any way, but to leverage that to build a strategy can, in some instances, be counterproductive, right? It's not necessarily going to lower your risk, right? And if you base prioritization on that, you may end up with a different outcome. So the important thing is just to really develop a basis for strategy. But if you go through these items sequentially, so what we see enterprises doing is implementing security tools and technologies based on frameworks. And so the strategic decision process is, we want to be ISO 27001 compliant, or we want to be NIST compliant. So it's a very controls-based approach. And as a result of that, what we see is that enterprises are moving from one initiative to the other, and they don't take the time to really validate their controls, right? Are they even working? Like, how do you know? Because you've got 70 projects on your plate, and you get done with one thing, you move on immediately to the next, and then you already forgot about the first thing, right? So, and then the other challenge is not prioritizing initiatives based on the greatest risk to the organization, right? So it's more about making sure the controls are in place than it is about lowering risk. And we think that's just wrong, right? Quite honestly, there's a lot of money being spent on controls that aren't necessarily improving the security posture of an organization. And by virtue of all of these things, right, enterprises, they struggle with this, right? How do you demonstrate a return on investment? All the vendors say, hey, your payback on our solution is 2 months or 3 months or 6 months or whatever it is, right? How do you actually demonstrate that, right? And a lot of enterprises aren't getting a return on their investment because they spend the money to put something in place, they rush through the implementation and move on to the next project. It's underdeployed, underutilized, and various different things. But anyway, net is demonstrating the return on investment and the reduction in risk, right? So how do you even know that the things that you're doing are lowering your risk. You know, the reality in the enterprise today is that the dollars spent on cybersecurity is going up very fast, and the number of compromises and breaches is going up very fast. So from that, you could draw the conclusion that we're spending money on things that are not actually lowering our risk, right? So what's a better way, really, to approach this? We call it the one team strategic plan. Our one team model is really about bundling services to address specific challenges in corporations, right? And so a one team strategic plan sets out to get more from your existing security. There's a lot of dollars you've likely already spent on tools and technologies and methodologies around, you know, various different approaches to solve security problems, and they're not necessarily bad, right? So don't just throw them away and start over because somebody comes along with a better idea. Get more from what you have already invested in. Minimize your exposure. So again, just, you know, lowering or improving your security posture or lowering your overall risk should be the ultimate goal, right? That is the end game that you're trying to accomplish. And obviously ensure that you're meeting compliance requirements. And this requirement does not go away, right? And compliance requirements could be regulatory or contractual, right? Your clients are saying you have to do certain things if you want to work with us. Make sure you're doing those things, right? And have a way to prioritize your initiatives based on actual risk, not just because, you know, people say endpoint security is hot or even MDR, right? Don't buy it because it's a hot technology. Buy it because it's something that you need. And at the end of the day, be able to rationalize these investments that you're making in cyber and ensure that you're getting a return on your investment, right? But at the same time, you want to make sure that you're reducing risk. So anything you'd like to add to that, Frank?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the quote that you referenced at the start of having those outcomes. The outcome should be to reduce your risk and not be just compliant to a framework or some type of regulatory item. So being able to demonstrate that, ensure that your organization has lowered its risk and that you're realizing the value and investments that you're making in the solutions, and that ultimately you get that outcome.
Yep. Very well said. So here's the ultimate irony in security. This is the reality of enterprise security. 97% of the breaches are at companies which have already deployed the right controls, right? These are breaches that are happening at companies that are putting the controls in place. So, I mean, what does that say about a control mentality? You can put all the right controls in place and still be compromised, right? It's not a matter of if but when. We hear this all the time in security now. It's likely to happen, right? But I think a big part of it is, you know, focusing on having this plethora of controls in place that our requirements tell us we need to do, and still leaving gaping holes in other places, and we'll talk about that in a second. 99% of attacks are known and have been for years. And by what we mean by attacks are the methodologies that the attackers use, right? Exploiting vulnerabilities that have been around forever, like RDP, you know, ports that are left open, misconfigurations, bad practices. These things, attackers are, you know, they run a business. They're not going to try to invent a new way to attack your network. They're going to turn on an automatic scanner that's going to look for RDP ports open everywhere on the internet, everywhere in the world, right? And they're going to get a list back. And they're going to try to attack them because they already know how to exploit that vulnerability. It's well documented. They actually have a handbook of instructions how to exploit that vulnerability, right? They're looking for known vulnerabilities. And it's kind of a paradox in security because there's so much emphasis put on zero-day attacks and all these new techniques. They're very sophisticated and require a very high level of expertise to accomplish. Most of the breaches that are happening and compromises of networks that are happening are on known vulnerabilities. I think it's a huge, it's a huge piece of awareness for businesses. If you do the blocking and tackling well, you will actually improve your security posture a lot and lower your risk a lot. 95% of firewall breaches are due to misconfiguration. We see this all the time. The same is true of cloud. Most of cloud data breaches occur because of misconfigurations and various different things. So how do you fix this problem? We think, and we talk at ASMGi about it being more of a shift in thinking. And basically what I mean by that is that there's really two modes of thinking. One is called the point solution mindset. And again, this in no way is to suggest that that point solutions aren't solving problems. If somebody says the problem I need to solve is preventing sensitive data from leaving my network, they're probably going to look at a DLP solution, right? If somebody says something different, they're probably going to look at something different. There's a purpose for point solutions. Like, different technologies solve different problems. There's no argument there. But the challenge, the problem with point solution mindset is that it's generally reactive. And what I mean by that is that most enterprises are reacting to some external force outside of themselves, right? It's the market says this is important, or the market says you have to protect yourself from this, or an external event like WikiLeaks occurs, and people rush to put DLP solutions in place so that data doesn't get exfiltrated from their network, right? So it's very reactive in nature. It's focused on controls, right? You pick a point solution to basically solve a specific control. And let's face it, like if you say, hey, we're ISO compliant, whatever, you put a bunch of controls in place, and then an auditor comes in once a year. Audits are designed to verify that you're doing the things you do, you say, not necessarily to verify that you're doing the right things, right? So if an ISO 27001 auditor comes in, they pull out their ISO 27001 checklist and they say, okay, you say you do this, show me some evidence, and you produce the evidence, and they check that box. They say, yes, you're doing that, and then at the end of the audit, you're ISO 27001 compliant. And I'm not saying, again, that ISO 27001 or any other framework doesn't address some things that are important. What I'm saying is, if that is your purpose, right, if that is your why, then there could be some challenges, because it may not even improve your security posture, those kind of things. Point solution mindset tends to be fragmented and inefficient. You're jumping from one solution to the next, and a lot of times people don't fully deploy or fully adopt a solution before they move on to the next one. And so it tends to be a little bit fragmented from that perspective, and it's also inefficient. A lot of dollars are being spent. In a lot of cases, there are returns on investment that are promised that are never achieved, right? So they tend to be things that the business wants or needs at a point in time, and it's important that we understand the or in this case, right? Most people say, I have to have this because I want it, or maybe they say that I need it, but it isn't really what they need. In other words, it isn't the highest, or shouldn't be the highest priority on the list, right? It's really more of what they want than what they need. But it isn't to say that a point solution mindset does not solve some needs, right? But it's usually one or the other. And then the last bullet on this is that people are spending a lot of money on this product-driven, technology-driven approach. A lot of money is spent, and a lot of returns are not necessarily happening, right? But a lot of money is spent, and it isn't necessarily improving your security. So the counter to this is a holistic mindset. And holistic, by definition, means the whole, right? So a holistic security mindset is really looking at your whole organization and establishing a basis for how you make decisions about security spends. It's more proactive in nature. So you develop a basis, you leverage prioritization and various different things, and you use that to make security decisions. It tends to focus more on total solutions, what we at ASMGi call a total solution. It's really the people, process, and technology aspect where point solutions focus mostly on the technology, in my opinion. Holistic thinking is gap-based and risk-based, right? So it's gap-based in that you actually establish, here's where we want to be, this is where we are, you know, and the difference is the gap, right? And so you have to fill those gaps to get where you're going. And so you can leverage that as a prioritization driver or various different things, but it's also risk-based because the way that you would prioritize engagements is by how much they impact your business. How much do they impact your risk? So, and again, it kind of all leads to it being more proactive in nature. It tends to be what the business wants and needs for more of a long-term mindset, right? So you set goals and objectives based on what you want and what you need, more importantly, even what you need, right? So one of the challenges as a service provider is, and, you know, just a little philosophizing on buying mentalities, right? People buy what they want. So our job is to get people what they need, but, you know, kind of make it look or sound or feel like what they want, right? Because that's what they're going to buy. So it's I think from a holistic security mindset standpoint, it's both, right? It's an and the reality is this: if you leverage this thinking, you'll spend less and you'll improve your security posture. It's an ideal outcome, right? So what do you think, Frank?
Yeah, I mean, just going back to your comments on the point solution mindset, you know, it can be really self-defeating when you do get the funding for some combination of tools and they really don't ultimately reduce your risk. And then the organization or management, the C-suite is questioning, you know, whether they should continue to invest in security and why the investment that was made did not ultimately result in making the organization's risk lower. So it really, you know, defeats the whole purpose of trying to move the agenda forward for your organization, and does not position you for truly helping reduce the risk and improving how you're positioned going forward.
Yep. Agreed. I you know, by way of example, I remember a CISO I was talking to one time, and we had presented a solution, and it was definitely something that they wanted and needed, right? And so we felt pretty confident in moving forward with this solution, and then nothing. I said, hey, Mr. CISO, where are you at with this in your decision-making process? And, you know, he said to me, just with kind of a smirk, we still want it. We definitely need it, but we're still working on last year's priorities, right? We're still working on the solutions that we had on our plate to finish last year. Implementation, I guess, takes a lot longer than you would think. But what occurred to me was you need it because it will actually improve your security posture, and you're tolerating this risk, you know, while you're, you know, kind of going through the motions, or, you know, from an overwhelmed standpoint. I have some empathy for CISOs, quite honestly, in enterprises, because I think historically the view on the security department has been a cost center, and, you know, boards and C-suites of enterprises have historically been pretty far removed from the decision process, but they want the outcomes, right? And so they're saying, hey, do this, do that, do the other thing, without, you know, being really close to it. And so a lot of times there can be an overwhelmed feeling, and that drives some of the reactive nature of the point solution mindset, for sure. So here's something that we leverage at ASMGi to really address this problem, and we call it One Team, right? So it's a total solution approach to solving problems. And what we, you know, basically believe is that a total solution is a program plus technology plus operations. And in the security paradigm, we're all familiar with this saying, people, process, and technology. And I think today a lot of times that's being refreshed with tools, talent tools and techniques, right? But for us, it's about developing a program which really articulates the strategic objectives, like what outcomes are you trying to achieve, what SLAs, any of the what really or the how goes into the program. And you tie it to strategic objectives that matter and that will actually demonstrate that it's working, right? And then you use that program to put the right technology in place, and you put a platform in place that'll help you do these things. And there are thousands of, technologies available, tools and technologies available to solve very specific problems. But your program should drive what's the right fit for you, like what strategic objectives are you trying to meet? And then lastly, the operations, right? How do you operationalize all these things? So you have a program and a technology. You can't just put it in place. You have to show up to work tomorrow and actually do it. So how are these things actually going to get done on a day-to-day basis? And what we're seeing is that a lot of enterprises just don't have the resources to really accomplish what they set out to accomplish, right? So they do a good job of putting a program in place. They do a good job of putting even the right technology in place. And then from an operational standpoint, they just don't have either the headcount or the expertise or whatever the resource deficiency may be. They just don't have the resources to accomplish what they set out to accomplish. And so I think it's a key element to really make sure that the operations piece is addressed and that you can accomplish the things that you want to accomplish, and outline in your program. Any thoughts on that, Frank?
Yeah, I mean, that's just another example where, there might be the funding for, say, in this, example, the technology, but unless the investment's made in the ongoing operational component and the resources to leverage that technology and investment, then you never really realize the full value of that solution. So, and then, once again, the organization might be at risk and question why the investment was made in that particular technology. So it really is important to have those three pillars addressed.
Agreed. So let's focus now on just specifically managed security and MDR. What is it? What is ASMGi's one team MDR MSOC all about? And just kind of looking at the service offering itself, there's our SOC as a service managed security service. So we call it One Team MDR MSOC Plus. And the reason we call it that is because it's basically what's available on the commercial market plus some other things. And the way that we achieve it is by bundling. And so this is how we think we can create economies of scale, right? It is how we can create economies of scale. It's how we do more than what you can go out and buy in a point solution world, right? So our One Team MDR MSOC Plus program includes MDR, obviously, right? Managed Detect and Response, which is a huge factor in today's security landscape because, we'll talk about this a little more ongoing, but being able to detect that somebody is on your network is a critical factor, and it isn't always happening, right? But one of the other things that we're doing in this bundle is true cyber incident response and forensics, right? So if there is a compromise of your network and it's identified, then how do you contain it? How do you preserve the evidence so that it isn't destroyed, right? How do you remediate the problem and take care of the things that you need to take care of so that you can continue to conduct business, and those things all fall into that bucket. Also, vulnerability management, right? So by virtue of this program, we can put agents, or we do put agents on all your systems to leverage for both the MDR service, but also for vulnerability management. So a lot of enterprises that we work with already have vulnerability management scanners, so it gives us an opportunity to basically validate. But if the validation occurs, then the possibility exists to take cost out of the equation by eliminating the old solution and those kind of things. But a lot of people who are doing vulnerability management have no validation, right? So they run a scanner, It says, hey, here are your validations. How do you know that it's finding the things that it needs to find, and those kind of things. So managed risk services, custom reporting, and user behavior analytics, they're all bundled into this core service offering. And then we have some different flavors of the service, like a Premier, which basically includes all of those things plus attack simulation. And this we could do, and actually have done, and we'll do more presentations specific to attack simulation. But it's an emerging area that has a tremendous amount of value for enterprises today. So historically, we generally know what pen testing is and how it's leveraged for an organization, and a lot of compliance requirements require annual pen testing and those kind of things. But the challenges in today's business landscape are, you do a pen test and you don't do it again for a year later, right? A day later, that pen test is obsolete because something in the environment, your environment or the market in general, has changed. A new vulnerability comes out, those kind of things. So how do you even know that you're protected? Attack simulation gives you a method to basically do continuous attacks against your own network, and they're simulated attacks, right? So it doesn't affect production in any way and those kind of things. It's a really cool set of technologies. It's MITRE Attack Framework based. MITRE Attack Framework, for those of you who don't know, is kind of the de facto standard in creating a list of attack methodologies or techniques, TTPs, if you will, tactics, techniques, and procedures that the bad guys use to attack your network. And again, they follow the playbooks. They're going to leverage these TTPs. And when they establish a new or find a new vulnerability and establish a new methodology to attack it, they publish it. And then it becomes a TTP that gets added to the MITRE framework. It actually gets added to our attack simulation framework. Within 48 hours, we actually have an SLA for that, right? So there are a lot of benefits to it, one of which is finding out not just where your vulnerabilities are, not saying I want to be ISO 27000 compliant and putting a bunch of controls in place, right? Or finding or leveraging your vulnerability scanner saying these are the vulnerabilities we need to fix. What we're actually doing is prioritizing based on the way attackers would get into your network. And just, fix those things that are the largest gaping holes, right? The highest priorities that create the most risk for you. If you fix them, you'll get the most bang for your buck, if you will. So it's a good way to really demonstrate that you're doing the right things. And again, we can provide reports and do provide reports, custom reporting that shows the improvements you're making in your security posture, and it shows your risk being improved, and things like that. So, and then we also have a one-team, I'll say a platinum package, which is custom, and it basically includes, other services that can be added to this portfolio, the Premier portfolio. But some of the services that we can add are security awareness and phishing, for example, and we do that as a service, right? So we create a bundle that includes that. So we can send out phishing emails. We can, create and or leverage security awareness training and those kind of things. Third-party risk as a service, we can add to it. Other things as required. So pretty much everything you can think of in your toolbox full of tools and technologies we'll do as a service, and we'll include it'll be basically designed to achieve the outcome, not to leave you hanging, right? Our goal in these packages is to unburden you from having to do these things. And so it includes the program developing, make sure you have a robust program in place. It includes technologies, and a lot of times they're third party. In most cases, actually, they're third party technologies. But then also the operations piece, like actually doing the operations. So you just don't have to worry about those things. So that's and our MDR, MSOC programs in general. So why are these important, and why should it matter to you, right? So this I thought was very interesting, and we hear about it a lot, and you've probably heard it about a lot as well. But when people compromise your network, in general, they hang out for a long time before they're ever even discovered. This is true of a lot of data breaches, right? They, on average, in fact, 206 days to detect an infection or a compromise of your network. 206 days. It's mind-boggling when you think about it. So another 73 days to actually resolve the problem, right? So the bottom line is, time at risk is the sum of those two. More than 9 months is the average, time at risk for compromised networks and data breaches. It's just mind-boggling when you think about it. What do you think, Frank?
Yeah, I mean, and during that time frame, a lot of organizations, won't be able to detect what's going on, and whether it's a data exfiltration or compromising user accounts, there's any number of things that could happen during that duration of time. So it's really important to be able to reduce that time down so that directly you can reduce the risk to the organization as well.
Yep. Excellent. So I wanted to highlight, so Gartner has a maturity model around a modern SOC, and what tooling and stage of maturity for modern SOCs, right? And so if you just look at the features and functionality at the bottom of the stack, you see a SIM, right? So most enterprises have a SIM or some sort of SIM in place, but the challenge is now with SIMs become just, every single device, security or network related or even infrastructure related on the IT side, they all create data, right? They all create logs and they all get sent to your SIM. And the primary purpose of a SIM is to be able to correlate events, really. So humans, as we know, can't read that much data and certainly can't correlate events. Like they can't say these 12 things all happened at 12:02 p.m. and that's when your breach happened. And then you can extrapolate, how it happened and what and various different things. But most enterprise SIMs are designed specifically to collect data and to correlate events. In today's world, it's more than just that. It's more than just correlation. It's real-time being able to detect indicators of compromise and really understand if there's somebody on your network that shouldn't be there, right? If there's an intruder on your network, if you've been compromised. But SIM being the bottom of the stack, right? So that functionality from a modern SOC, you have to have it clearly. Threat intelligence and sandboxing. So threat intelligence is basically understanding, again, what are the IOCs and how you leverage them. Indicators of compromise, like how do you know if you've been compromised, or IOAs, indicators of attack. So how do you know if you're under attack and those kind of things. A lot of people get feeds from multiple threat intelligence sources and various different things. Network traffic analysis, key area of focus, right? So actually looking at the traffic on your network is critical to understanding if something bad is going on. Endpoint detection and response, EDR, so we've probably all heard about that. And then the top of the stack, so the most mature modern SOCs include user and entity behavior analytics and security orchestration, automation, and response, or SOAR, which is emerging, right? And so many of you, if you're a larger enterprise, are probably experimenting with some SOAR type technology. Smaller enterprises are probably not there quite yet. But anyway, it's a way of evaluating, okay, so we have a SOC in place. Here are the things that Gartner says you need to be doing to establish some level of maturity. And I think, to me, what becomes interesting is that if you took the services that we do and include in the MDR MSOC Plus program, you jump right to a 3.5 maturity right out of the gate, right? So now this isn't to say if you're not doing other things, right, that your security posture is good. This is just as it relates to the modern SOC maturity model from Gartner, but it's a key factor to consider for sure. And then the other thing I really like about this slide is this gray box at the bottom that says remember. the maturity of your security program does not correlate with the number of tools. And this we see all the time in the marketplace. Enterprises, again, this is that point solution mentality, right, are buying a lot of technology and putting them in place, right, getting them deployed or at least partially deployed. And what Gartner is saying is that this does not mean that you're mature, right? Oh, any thoughts on that, Frank?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to the points that we're making is that, you have to look at things holistically. You have to have a plan for the investments that you're making. And, not only do the tools not solve the problem, again, you have to have that operational component that we've talked about, and then, looking at it from, how that then is lowering your overall risk. So I know we keep coming back to that point, but it really has to be part of an overarching plan. Just having those point solutions and not having them ultimately work together and complement each other does not help lower your risk.
Yep, well said. Well said. So who is this service for? And again, I just make a few points here, but the reality is this. It's really it's valid for anybody. All industries are going through this transformation, right? This digital transformation process, which drives the need for security for a number of different reasons, right? It's more important than ever to focus on your core competencies and the revenue generators of your business. And so you should be putting more emphasis on that than the other areas of your business that are not core competencies. That's one factor. But the other thing that digital transformation does, I think, is that by virtue of things going more digital, we see this today more than ever, right, with the work from home situation and various different things. With things going more digital, the attack surfaces increase, and there become more areas that for concern and consideration and those kind of things. So really this service applies to any company then in any industry that doesn't have the resources, either headcount or expertise, to do this themselves, period, right? So I would say, like, for the audience out there, if you're thinking about this, it really should be based on if you have 100 people in your security department, then maybe this isn't the right solution for you, right? Then maybe you have the resources to keep up with the changing landscape, the changing technology, this changing threats, and all those other things. But if you don't, then you should seriously consider this as a viable way of improving your security posture, because for a lot of companies, it is impossible to keep up with the rate of change of technology, the rate of change of attack surfaces, attack methodologies, and various different things. So any company that doesn't have the resources, whether that's the people, right, the headcount quantitatively, or even the expertise, right? I don't know how many times I've talked to people that say, yeah, this is great. When we present a solution, we need this, but we don't have the capacity to take on a new technology right now. Why don't you come back and talk to me in a year? So what we're saying with this package is you don't have to take on a new technology. We're going to do everything for you. And I think it's a huge benefit, right? Size of the company doesn't really matter. So this is one of the things that I can't emphasize enough. It isn't how big or how small you are as a company, as an enterprise. It's whether or not you have the resources, right? So we work with a lot of small businesses who just don't have the resources to do cyber, right? And a lot of their customers are big businesses, so they can't put them at risk, and they have contractual obligations and various different things from a third-party risk standpoint, right? So they're great clients because they have to maintain a certain security posture and manage their risk proactively. But large enterprises as well. So just because you're a large enterprise doesn't mean that you have the expertise and the headcount to do a lot of the security things that you need to do. So it's a good fit for any company in any vertical that needs the outcome. Again, it goes back to the opening quote. People are more inclined to buy outcomes today. If you need the outcome, you should consider the service. And one of the points that we generally make is that, especially if you have compliance requirements, whether they're driven by regulatory or contractual basis, but if you have compliance requirements like banking, for example, FFIEC and OCC are driving a lot of things that say you have to do these things, right? You have to do these things. Healthcare, a lot of regulated industries, have regulatory compliance requirements, but really almost every company has compliance requirements today, believe it or not, because of, new privacy laws. If you do business overseas, GDPR. If you do business domestically, California privacy law, New York privacy law, and, various different other things. The central U.S. government can't seem to, kind of gain traction with more of a national approach to privacy and those kind of things. So, enterprises have a lot of different requirements to meet and those kind of things. So, I just wanted to talk a little bit about what's different about this service than the other things on the market. And, we put a lot of energy at ASMGi into differentiation and creating a package that we feel is really different than anything else. And when I look at what's commercially available from an MDR, an MSOC, or a SOC as a service solution, and it doesn't matter whose solution it is, they call it probably one of these three things, or maybe all three of them. But the reality is, even if they say they do incident response, they don't do incident response, right? Their MDR stands for Manage, Detect, and Response. They detect that something is going on. They do filter proof positives or false positives, right? So that you're not left dealing with those. So I'm not saying that there isn't a benefit. And quite honestly, this isn't a dig on the companies that are doing MDR solutions, because we leverage them to do our package, but they don't do incident response. Their response is basically, hey, you've got an incident, right? And so you're left to your own devices to figure out what to do about it. And that is, or even if they support what to do about it with experts, you still have to do it yourself, right? And so that's one of the differentiators. But that applies to incident response, remediation, and vulnerability management, as well as some other valuable security services. And I just kind of tried to sum that up, because there are a lot of things that we can package into this bundle, like security awareness and phishing, for example, as a service, right? If it's bundled in here, then it would obviously be included. And most of the SOC as a service, all of the SOC as a service solutions that are out there don't include those things, right? So again, it's a holistic security approach versus a point solution. The other thing, so I guess in summarizing all of that, what we wanted to create, and we created with our MDR MSOC Plus service and premium services, is something that is not currently available on the commercial market. And so you would have to do all of these things individually. It's a very fragmented and inefficient way to really approach the problem. So customers need a total solution, and this is becoming more apparent every day, quite honestly, because customers just don't have time to mess around with it, right? And so want and need, I think, is a key point. It's an and. It's a summation of both, and a total solution includes all of those components. So I think consumers or companies are less tolerant to implementing a piece of a solution and actually having to do those things. I use vulnerability management as a metaphor a lot of times, because the vulnerability scanners that are out there, they basically do a great job of identifying what the vulnerabilities are, but you still have to fix them yourself, right? And so then the other key point is that bundling decreases your cost and increases your security posture. So it's exactly what we said it was going to do, right? If you think about it, if you buy everything individually, it's very inefficient and can be very expensive. If you buy it as a bundle, you're buying the outcome in general. So we're running out of time, but I want to just do a quick poll question again. Paul's going to launch it, so you'll see a pop-up box just like last time. Are you considering managed security in the next 12 months? So let us know what you think there.
Steve, maybe while we're waiting for the results, I know, one of the things that we've talked about is, how we go from what an organization might be doing today to implementing the solution. Maybe at just a high level, what does a typical onboarding process look like?
I think in general, onboarding includes a couple of different things. Like one is establishing a baseline of where you're at today, what tools and technologies are in place, what is it that you're trying to accomplish. We will always ask that question, right? We talked about that at the beginning of the presentation. What problems are you trying to solve? What outcomes do you hope to achieve, and those kind of things. So once we have an understanding of that, we can put a package together that specifically creates those outcomes. We actually leverage a lot from an advisory standpoint. We do this across all industries for a lot of different customers. So a lot of times customers are like, hey, what should we be doing, right? And the answer is inevitably it depends, right? But we can leverage the visibility we have into, other things that we're doing to make some recommendations and suggestions about, did you think about this? You ought to be doing this. But creating that package generally comes from that perspective.
All right.
So I have. Whoops, I'm sorry. Go ahead. You can keep asking questions if you want. I was just going to say, I think that we're probably done with the survey. I don't know if the time is up or not, but the results we have so far are unanimously yeses on considering managed security in the next 12 months. So I think that's great. That's great news, really. And I think it's responsible for everybody to be thinking about, like, how do I keep up with everything that's going on and deal with that. So, and we will send these slides out so that everybody has access to this information. So go ahead with some questions, additional questions, Frank, if you have some.
Another question that came in is, how do we incorporate an existing team or tools into the model and process of not only the initial upfront onboarding process, but also going forward model or operating model?
Yep, that's a great question, actually, and I'll use vulnerability management as an example, right? So a lot of enterprises already have a vulnerability scanner in place. Our core offering is going to include agents on all of the endpoints, and vulnerability management is one of the things that we can do. So, or one of the things that we do as part of the core package. So I think, like, step one is leave the existing solution in place if it's viable, right? And compare it, right? So validate that you're flushing out the vulnerabilities that you have, and how to proceed from there. But let's just say that they are validated, right? So our scanner, our vulnerability scanner, is finding the same vulnerabilities that the existing vulnerability scanner is. There's an opportunity for a cost out or a cost reduction in this sense, right? So I would say step one from an existing technology standpoint is keep it in place. And we do managed services today with enterprises around existing technologies that they already have in place. And so I think we would look at a staged approach and help you establish business drivers or strategic objectives that leverage what you had already invested in, and then make recommendations about how you can increase the efficiency and not sacrifice the security posture, or the risk posture in this case.
Okay. And then one other question that came in, I know we're at the end of our time, is do we work with, I know we talked about lowering the cost and improving the level of security. How do we work with clients, or how our clients realize the value of their investment in this service? So we do any type of ROI, or how do we demonstrate that they are in fact getting the value?
Yep, another great question. So there are a couple things that we do to demonstrate value, but I will say that that's really what this program is about, is making sure that this is true of everything that we do at ASMGi. We want to make sure that you have the information you need to make good business decisions, and that ultimately means, having that information about ROI and kind of risk scoring at your disposal. So we do monthly reporting as part of this service. So you'll get monthly reports that show there's just a plethora of standard reports that we can show, but just, how many incidents, how many this and how many of that, right? But we also show what, for Active Directory, for example, just collective aggregate risk scoring and risk posture. So we'll show your risk as it relates to, kind of where you are today, and each month where you are. And we'll schedule quarterly business reviews, QBRs, to sit down with your team once a quarter and actually, make sure that you truly understand all of these things and how the money that you're spending is impacting your overall security posture and those kind of things. I can probably include some standard reports as part of the follow-up where we'll create a PDF of the slides and send it out to everyone that's on the event. But we can include some standard reports that help demonstrate those things as well.
Okay, great. I think that's it for now. We're at a little over our time.
Yeah, okay. I apologize if we didn't get to all the questions. Let me just, I wanted to mention there is the special offer for attendees. And again, I really appreciate your willingness to share your time with us today. One of the things that we'll do for anyone who's on the webinar is just give you an hour, basically. Let's set up a call and just evaluate, kind of where you're at in your security program development and how you accomplish certain things. And let's just see if managed security can help you decrease costs and increase security posture. I think it's a worthy conversation to have, and we're definitely willing to do that. So please take advantage of this and just find out if managed security is viable and can really help you take some cost out of your current model and the way that you do things, help you sleep better at night, right? Actually improve your security posture as well. So thank you again to everyone on the call. Thank you, Frank, for your insights as well. And please reach out and ask us if you have any questions or those kind of things. And the contact information will be on the slide. So there will be a follow-up that goes out to all the attendees. We have recorded the webinar. Paul will post it up to a YouTube channel at ASMGi, so you'll be able to view it again or share it with colleagues. But please ask us if you have any questions. And thank you again, everybody.
Great. Thank you.